Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be part 24, chapter 24. Shota will admit, as he's currently sprawled across the couch, that he probably could have handled the situations between his nephew and foster son a little better. He hadn't thought anything wrong with it at first. It was logical to do things in order of importance, and what was most important then was getting Hitoshi's wrist wrapped up and supported. Everything else came second to someone's physical well-being. In hindsight, he probably should have expected that sort of reaction from his nephew. Hitoshi's a wonderful kid, but he could also be an ass when he felt threatened or nervous. Hitoshi was a shy kid, or maybe shy wasn't quite the word. He was withdrawn. He didn't isolate himself from family, but he tended to prefer to be alone outside in the world, or at school. Shota himself didn't see a problem with it, but it was something that had always worried his sister and brother-in-law. Shota had gotten many phone calls from his sister over the years about Hitoshi isolating himself or not having many friends, of her worry for her only child. After all, she'd watched how Shota had grown up from the sidelines, and he always knew that she'd been worried about him as well. And it made sense. As soon as you had a quirk people deemed villainous, nothing else matters. Hitoshi had only ever been 3 when he'd gotten his quirk, when he'd asked his father for an All Might action figure at the store, and despite being told no, it was his birthday fast approaching and presents were already purchased and wrapped, he'd somehow managed to leave the store with a paid-for All Might figure. His control back then was awful, as it was for most kids who manifest in such situations. His father had snapped out of the control, or Hitoshi had released it outside the store, or whatever had happened, and instantly the man had known it was a quirk, Hitoshi's quirk. Shota had heard all about it over the phone after Hitoshi's first quirk counseling visit. Mind-based quirks were always tended to really quickly. Children referred to specialists who can help them control it fast. Wayward mind-based quirks were always a problem. Question-based hypnosis was hard to control for an inquisitive child. He had a lot of control accidents where he accidentally prompted his parents under it with innocent questions. He'd managed to get Hizashi more times than Shota can count, and he himself had fallen victim to it once or twice too, but the more it happened, the more Hitoshi noticed the signs of someone under his control, and he was always quick to let them go with frantic apologies when he did. By the time he was almost 5, he'd had a fair amount of control over it. He still slipped, as did a lot of the children when they got upset or emotional, but it was a surprising amount of control for someone so young. That didn't matter as soon as word got out around school, though. Hitoshi, like many others with villainous quirks or even without quirks, were bullied pretty heavily throughout his childhood. They tried to swap him to different schools, but word of this quirk always got out, and he was always treated accordingly. He was taught by his peers that his quirk was scary, that he was a villain waiting to happen, and not a lot that his parents or uncles could say would change it. Shota had thought that there wouldn't be any tension between his problem child and his nephew. They came from similar situations. Both had been bullied relentlessly. Hitoshi he knows for sure, and Izuku he's almost positive about. The quirkless were treated almost inhumanely in this day and age, and there's an obvious sign of trauma buried in the green-haired child. If he'd only manifested his quirk on the day of the entrance exam, then he'd grown up quirkless. Plus, there was the rivalry-not-rivalry that Izuku had with Bakugo. That always rubbed Shota the wrong way. There was more to that than Izuku was willing to share. The point was, he'd thought the two boys would have understood each other, which is why he hardly even thought about bringing Hitoshi home. Tending to the teen's wrist with high-quality medical-grade equipment. Sure, Hitoshi'd been upset. More upset than Shota had thought, and then Izuku was, well, he's not quite sure. He'd never seen such submissiveness from their foster child, and it's then that Shota has a small inkling of regret pulling in his stomach. It starts off bad, sure, but it ends with Hitoshi and Izuku setting up a lunch date the following day at school, so could it really have been that bad? Yes, apparently so, or so he's been told. "Hey, show him home," Hizashi greets, and the dark-haired man is barely stirring from where he slumped along the couch. Hizashi walked into the room, huffs fondly, and leans over the couch to press his hand on Shota's shoulder, giving it a quick rub before he's moving on to the kitchen. "Got held up a little, so I brought home some burgers for dinner." "Sounds good," Shota mumbles into the couch, and he's not yet wanting to get up. "Is the green bean in his room?" Hizashi inquires from the kitchen. "Wasn't too sure what to get him, so I grabbed a couple for him to pick from. Can't go wrong with leftovers, yeah?" "Last time I checked," Shota replies with a sigh, finally pushing himself up. He stretches his back out and slowly steps to the kitchen, leaning against the doorway. How was the station? Same old. Hizashi shoots a bright smile over his shoulder at Shota. Ogawa-san had lost his voice, so I filled in for him. Not as much fun as my show, but it was still good. You only like your show so much because you get to be rowdy and play all your favorite music. I don't see a problem with that. Hizashi gives a bright laugh, head lolling in Shota's direction as he unpacks the takeaway bags. So, how was training with Toshi? Any luck with the capture weapon? Unless you count him roping the ceiling beams, swinging across the room as if he was a poor imitation of Tarzan, then proceeding to throw himself into a wall when his capture weapon gives out mid-swing, before plummeting to the ground a success, then no. Ouch! Hizashi winces in sympathy. He okay? He's fine, Shota promises gruffly. Just a sprain. Brought him back here to fix him up before texting Yuuei to come pick him up. She wasn't impressed, if you can imagine. Shota thinks back to only half an hour earlier, when he had guided Hitoshi down to the parking lot. Neither of them had spoken, just kept pace with each other as they moved. Yuuei, Shota's sister, had been pulled up in front of the building. She'd given Shota a half-hearted glare before her eyes dropped to a bowed-headed Hitoshi, where she'd fretted over him, much to Hitoshi's embarrassment. They'd gotten chewed out, the both of them. Shota knew it was inevitable, so he simply was leaning against the open window and taking the lecture with a frown. She'd always been an older sister, and he'd always be treated like a little brother, no matter how old he got. He's not sure he'll ever be able to escape scoldings from her. When she's done ranting about the obvious dislike for the capture weapon in her son's possession, the ones that currently tucked away in Shota's bag upstairs, Yuuei had refused for Hitoshi to keep it on his person until he knew how to control it better. She'd been hell-bent on it after Hitoshi had decided to try and learn more by himself, alone in his bedroom, only to end up hog-tied on the floor for hours until his father got home. She demands to know how it happened. Her next question was simple, tone curled with a sharp annoyance. What on earth was Hitoshi doing swinging from the ceiling support beams anyway? And it's a good question. A logical one. Shota had called out a warning to the teenager, but it hadn't been taken to heart. He'd been a teacher long enough that as soon as you tell a teenager, a child, that they can't do something that they think they can, they seem to make an effort to prove you wrong. It really is unfortunate that most of the time Shota, or the adult in question, is right. Either way, though, Shota had long ago adopted the mindset of, if you're going to be stupid, you gotta be tough. Or he'd adopted it for when whatever those little hellspawn were up to wasn't dangerous or life-threatening. He wasn't above roping them in with his capture weapon when something looked like it could backfire dangerously. Little injuries, though, ones that students could feel for a bit and learn from, easily recoverable with time, or quick visits to Recovery Girl, they were different. Like Izuku competing in the rest of the apprehension test on the first day with his broken finger. Those were things that he was talking about, like Hitoshi swinging across the ceiling childishly showing off, only to fail and realize, hey, that probably wasn't very smart of me, to use a potentially dangerous tool I hardly have an ounce of control over like that. Which is exactly the answer he gives when his sister turns her questioning, slightly annoyed gaze onto him. Shota lifts his shoulders up, in a shrug, angling his head. He wanted to be an idiot, so I let him do it in a controlled environment. I told him not to do it. Yeah, Hitoshi huffs, not looking up. He did. Yuuei lets out a huff, breathy and annoyed, as she narrows her eyes at Hitoshi. You need to listen to your uncle, Tosh. The only reason I'm even letting you dabble with that scarf is because he assured me that you'd be safe, that you'd need something like it if you wanted to make it into a heroics course, and level with your peers. I do need it. Hitoshi swirls around to look at her, face pinched in panic. You saw the festival. I mean, Midoriya escaped my control. I need something that'll put me on their level. And you've seen Uncle Show with his. Relax, Hitoshi, Yuuei snorts. I'm not taking it away, even if it's against my better judgment. You just need to be more careful with it. And listen to your teachers. Shota might not be your teacher yet, but if you do make it into 1A or even 1B, you'll have to treat him just as the others. I look forward to making you run suicide sprints, Shota adds with a slight uptick of the corners of his lips. He catches his sister's gaze over the teenager, seeing her hiding a smile. If Tenya and Izuku can respect me as a sensei in the classroom setting, so can you. Got it, brat? Same goes for Zashi, but he's not had any complaints about you yet. I just know you'll be a nuisance for me, though. Hitoshi scoffs, arms crossing over his chest, where the sprain is in view. Shota can see his sister surveying over the injury now that it's in sight, lip worried between her teeth. When her gaze lifts to Shota, the man merely shakes his head at the silent question in her eyes. It's that maternal worry that is frequent in her gaze. She'd used to look at him the same way. Even still does, occasionally. Shota silently assures her it's nothing but a sprain that'll probably be healed up by the next training session they have on Thursday. Yeah, sensei, I got it. Hitoshi huffs as Shota rolls his eyes and Yua lightly swats Hitoshi's arm in a playful warning. Hitoshi gives a breathy laugh, his words obviously a sarcastic joke. Shota refrains from smiling, but his sister shoots him a teasing grin that cracks his deadpan expression anyway. Do you really make Midoriya do suicide sprints, Uncle Sho? When he deserves them. Shota shrugs, finally straightening from his lean against the car. And I'm sure you'll end up in the same boat, you reckless brat. Mom, Hitoshi pouts, gaze turning to his mother. Uncle Sho's calling me names again. You are a reckless brat. Yua huffs a laugh. She ruffles the sputtering Hitoshi's hair, ignoring the betrayed expression. I see how it is, Hitoshi drawls dramatically, looking between his mother and his uncle. You two are in cahoots. My own mother and my beloved Uncle Sho, plotting against me. Us? Shota raises an eyebrow looking at his sister, the two of them sharing a deadpan look. Never. Cahoots! Hitoshi accuses dramatically. You get your dramatic flair from your father, Yua scoffs, expression softening as she eyes her child fondly. Hitoshi gives a good-natured laugh, smiling lightly as he looks between his mother and his uncle. Anyways, thank you for patching up my reckless brat, Sho. Yua bows her head thankfully as Hitoshi slumps into the passenger seat. And sorry I couldn't meet your kid today. I've got to drop Toshi off at home and get to an appointment. The dark-haired man gives a grunt in reply, tucking his hands in his pockets. I doubt Izuku is much in the mood for introductions anyway. Hitoshi winces guiltily at that, but says nothing. Shota softens at the response, snaking a hand in through the window to ruffle through Hitoshi's wild purple hair. I kinda sprung it on him anyways. He'll probably need a second to wrap his head around it. You two should head home. Ice off your wrist. Hitoshi, it'll help with the swelling. Tell your mother if it hurts a lot. I'm sure she's gonna be worried, but it's just a sprain. But if it gets worse, I'll get it checked out. All right. Hitoshi nods under Shota's hand before leaning up into the hand like a cat that's butting its head against the affection. A smile flickers on the man's face before he presses his lips into a line. Thanks, Uncle Sho. Don't worry about it. Shota brushes off. I doubt I'll see you at school tomorrow, but drop by if you're planning to go see Recovery Girl. She'll give you less grief over it if an explanation is coming from me. And if not, enjoy your lunch date with Izuku. A lunch date? Yua grins wide as she looks over at Hitoshi. Hitoshi groans, burying his face in his hands. You have a lunch date? Aw, Tosh, I'm so proud of you making friends. I knew you could do it, baby. Thank you for that, Uncle Shota. Hitoshi forces out through gritted teeth. He gives Shota a long-suffering look before turning towards his mother, cheeks faintly flushed at the praise and attention. You're welcome, Shota teases, patting Hitoshi's head before pulling away entirely. He catches his sister's eyes. She grins widely, giving her brother a wave before finally rolling the window up and pulling away from the curb. He hears the tail end of the conversation, perhaps the beginning of it, as the window shuts and the car pulls away. I wouldn't say we're friends yet, Mom. He's just nice. I guess maybe we could be. Sho. Hizashi pulls Shota from his thoughts, other memories. The dark-haired man lets out a soft, sort of noise, and he drags his eyes up to meet his husband's gaze. Hizashi's now turned towards him, the takeaway bags forgotten on the counter behind him, and an unreadable expression twisted on his face. You brought Toshi home with you? Of course I did. Shota bristles, straightening up. He was hurt, Hizashi, and it certainly wasn't the first time he's come over. I wasn't going to send him home on the train without fixing him up. My sister would have decimated me if I had, which I would never. No. Hizashi frowns, hands raised in a placating, surrendering type of way. I don't care about that, Shota. You know I don't. I love Toshi. He's always welcome here. You know that. But did you, warn him before bringing him home? Warn him? Shota blinks, the defensive tension easing from his shoulder as he slumps against the doorframe. About? About? Hizashi repeats louder in surprised disbelief, eyes wide like he doesn't believe Shota could ask such a thing. Shota feels worry flurrying through his stomach as he takes in his husband's face, a frown pulling at his lips. Hizashi stares for a second like he's waiting for Shota to defend himself, or maybe tell him it was a joke. He's not sure what he's supposed to be defending, nor what his husband was even going on about. About Izuku, Shota. Did you not warn your nephew about the child we've taken in, the child living with us, before bringing him here? A child, might I remind you, that we did not have when Hitoshi last visited us a couple months ago? Shota's eye slivers, his frown deepens. He doesn't dare open his mouth. Shota. Hizashi's voice comes out in a low warning, eyes hardening. Did you even warn Izuku that you were bringing someone back with you? Someone from school, from his grade? That he beat during the festival? Ah, the error in his judgment. Shota has a sinking feeling that he's done something terribly wrong here now. No, he breathes the word out. There's no point in trying to lie. I didn't think it would matter. They know each other already. Knowing each other doesn't mean they like each other. Hizashi's mouth is dropped open in genuine disbelief. You can't just spring something like that on them. On either of them. We have a kid now, Shota. That's surprising, especially to Hitoshi, who's been the only child in your life besides Tenya, who doesn't really count considering before this school year, we only saw him a couple times a year. And Izuku's still settling in. You can't just bring people he knows home with you, not without giving him a heads up. I didn't think it would matter. Shota repeats with a frown, or maybe he wasn't thinking completely straight. Izuku had become a part of his everyday life now, to the point that he didn't need to think about it. It just slipped his mind that Hitoshi and Izuku hadn't really met in the nephew-foster-son sort of way. Plus, he was a little disoriented with the fact his nephew was hurt. He might have seemed level-headed, but there was something distinctly fear-inducing that lit up in his chest when it came to the children in his personal life getting hurt. Hitoshi, Izuku, and Tenya. He's not sure why it feels different from when kids in his classes, well, maybe not this year's Class 1A, because they're already different than any other years he's had. But in general, they got injured. He had to keep a professional calm when dealing with school injuries, dealing with kids being hurt. That was personal. Hizashi's mouth opens and closes twice, hands held out in front of him like he's trying to decide between cupping Shota's cheeks or clamping down on his shoulders and shaking sense into him. He settles for cupping Shota's cheeks in his hands, eyeing him with a sigh. Shota, my love, my darling, I have absolutely no idea how you've survived this long, with the social grace of a toddler. Shota cocks his head slightly, Hizashi's hands moving with him. Surely I'm not that bad. The blonde's thumbs stroke lightly under his, one featherly grazing over his USJ scar, as he snorts a laugh. Tell that to the foster kid who just got a surprise visit from the kid who he beat in the sports festival, and the nephew who just walked into our apartment to find the kid who beat him in the sports festival sitting on the couch who is now your foster son. Shota blinks, nose scrunching up. Well, when you put it like that, that's the only way to put it. Hizashi pats gently at Shota's cheek before pressing a kiss there. Think of it like introducing a new cat to one you already have. You ease them into it, right? You can't just drop them in a room together and hope for the best. You're more likely to get a cat fight if you do that. Shota shakes his head. They're fine now. It was a bit rough at the start, I'll admit, but now they're on good terms. They're even having lunch together tomorrow. No cat fight. That's because one of those metaphorical cats was Izuku. Hizashi sighs fondly, turning back to sorting through the fast food. The literal embodiment of sunshine. Any other cat and someone would have lost an eye. Point taken. Shota heaves a heavy sigh. He slumps forward to hook his chin over Hizashi's shoulder, leaning against Hizashi and letting the blonde support his weight easily. He snakes his arms around his husband's waist, and Hizashi lets his head fall to the side to bump against Shota. We should get another cat, though. No way! Hizashi laughs heartily, nosing at Shota's cheek. Let's just keep trying to navigate the sun we just got, yeah? No more cats for now. Fine, Shota huffs, eyes slipping closed. 3 and a kid is all right for now anyways. What the fuck? Shinsou repeats, voice low and unseeing, gaze not straying from the fallen book. Oboros floundering. He'd leapt up from the chair in his surprise and looked between fleeing the room and picking the book back up, to which Izuku prays he doesn't do. Oh man, Oboro whispers. I definitely think he noticed Izu. You think, Oboro? You think? What? Izuku manages to croak out, jumping up from the bed and standing at the book's side. He catches a wide-eyed, panicked Oboro's gaze, but forces his attention away instantly. What happened? What the fuck? Shinsou repeats for a third time, barely managing to look at Izuku before he's glaring down at the book like it'll suddenly move as soon as his eyes are off of it. And given the situation, that's not far-fetched. Midoriya, what the fuck? What? Izuku asks again, this time keeping his voice neutral. It takes everything in him to swallow down the fear in his voice, but he's not sure his heart will stop pounding in his chest until Shinsou's gone, and he's had at least 2 hours to collapse in bed and not move a muscle. What's wrong? The book, Midoriya. Shinsou lifts a deathly still hand to point at the book on the floor. What about it? Izuku winces internally at the stutter. Why are you so upset I left a book on the floor? I'm sorry, Shinsou. I'll pick it up, all right? Stop. The purple boy snaps, and Izuku does. He freezes in his steps and stares at the other teen like a deer caught in the headlights of a car. Izuku wilts as Shinsou's gaze hardens on the book, eyes narrowing. You're trying to tell me that you left an open book in the middle of your floor? That's what you're really trying to tell me right now? Seriously? Shinsou repeats in disbelief, finally jerking his attention to Izuku. No, Midoriya, no. Don't play dumb. That book was levitating. That book just fell to the floor untouched. Levitating? Izuku repeats with a nervous laugh, hoping it doesn't sound as nervous as he feels. That's absurd, Shinsou. Books don't float or levitate. Do you need to sit down? Are you feeling okay? I can get your uncles. Fuck off. Shinsou gapes, nose wrinkled, as he scowls in Izuku's general direction. The purple-haired teen looks back at the book when Izuku can't manage to open his mouth. That just fell. Don't tell me I imagined it. I'm not stupid, Midoriya. I saw it. I heard it. You're not, Izuku hurriedly agrees. I didn't mean... I know you're not, but it fell off the edge of the desk because gravity pulled it down like gravity does. Damn right it was gravity. That's probably the only normal thing about this, the fact that gravity did its job. Shinsou snaps, marching into the room and crouching down to look at the book. Gravity dragged the levitating book to the floor when whatever the hell was holding it up stopped. The book is nowhere near the desk, Midoriya. There's no way it could have just fallen from the desktop and landed open here. It's practically in the middle of your bedroom floor. Shinsou reaches a careful hand out, hesitating for a second like it might jump up and attack him, before flipping the book shut. He blinks down at the cover, then he's slowly lifting his gaze to Izuku's face, and the green-haired teen feels his cheeks heat up. Oh, right. Oboro was reading that book. Shinsou's mouth twitches like he's trying very hard to keep his expression neutral. I didn't peg you as a romance novel kind of guy. Izuku is not a romance novel kind of guy. He's a hero nerd. He mainly likes reading news articles and hero forums online. Don't get him wrong. There's nothing wrong with it, reading romance novels, to each their own. He can get behind a romance film occasionally, and rom-coms are pretty good. But he'd never been one to sit down and read a romance novel. He'd been beyond embarrassed as the librarian had blinked in surprise, studying Izuku intently as she checked the book out for him. A group of girls had been behind him too, and they giggled when they noticed it, smiling softly at his tomato-red face, and that, of course, had just made his embarrassment even worse. He'd only gone through with it because Oboro was bouncing on his heels behind Izuku in the line, raving about wanting to read that one in particular for years. The things he does for a ghost. Hey! Oboro withdraws, voice squeaky as he worries his bottom lip between his teeth, pushing himself into the corner like he'd personally been called out of his novel choice. Don't make it weird. There's nothing wrong with romance novels. I like the storyline. Well, I like the storyline. Izuku winces as he says, eyes flicking down to the novel before looking away fast. Don't make it weird. I'm not. Shinsou lifts a hand in surrender, still crouched by the book. Like whatever you want to like, man. It's no difference to me. I just didn't expect it is all. Seriously, I don't care. A pause. Shinsou cuts himself off abruptly, gaze dropping back to the book. Besides, Shinsou's expression sharpens like he'd forgotten for a second what started this in the first place. It's not you reading it that's weird. It's floating midair and dropping to the ground that's weird. It wasn't floating, Shinsou. That's insane. That's, impossible. Books don't. It was just, the wind. Izuku opens his mouth to repeat Oboro on instinct, but his jaw snaps shut instead as the words filter through his brain, thankfully. He looks back at his bedroom window, which is shut tightly, no air moving in his bedroom whatsoever. He chances a look back to glare at the ghost that's tucked in the corner, seemingly not to notice the window is even closed, and looking incredibly proud of himself. I threw it, Izuku tells him instead, mentally wanting to facepalm. Oboro whines at his side about how he just missed a perfectly viable excuse. You threw it. Shinsou narrows his eyes, still crouched by the book. I thought gravity knocked it off your desk, or that you were reading it in the middle of your floor. No. Izuku's lungs wheeze as he stutters through his words, not taking a second to suck in any air in his panic. I definitely threw it. You startled me. I know I was expecting you, but you're early, so I thought I had time to read some of it. I just, threw it when the door opened. Shinsou seems to actually stall at the excuse, turning it over in his head a couple of times to find any flaws. Izuku can himself pick out a dozen, but then again he knows exactly why the book was floating in midair. That can't be. Shinsou shakes his head, hard expression melting to a worried defeated. You're wrong. I saw it floating for like 5 whole seconds. You were on your bed, on your phone, Midoriya. It's literally still on and open where you tossed it onto your bed when I came in. Shinsou raises his hand to card stressfully through his purple hair, making it stand even crazier. He stares down at the book in disbelief, before finally standing up and inching away from it. I saw it. I'm not crazy, Midoriya. And ouch, isn't that a dagger to the heart? Dread pulls in Izuku's stomach as he takes in Shinsou. His eyes are wide with panic and disbelief and a hint of fear, but he's not afraid of the book, or what he'd seen entering the room. No, Shinsou is afraid he's actually going crazy. Izuku knows what that feels like. He knows what it's like to be in Shinsou's position and not have anyone believe him. He knows how scary it is to think that you're going insane when you're not. He knows. You're not. Izuku forces out, ducking his head. It's against his better judgment, his heart pounding with panic, but he can't let someone else feel like he does. Like how he'd felt growing up. It's cruel. He wouldn't wish it on his worst enemy. You're definitely not crazy, Shinsou. Really? The teen gives a humorless laugh, turning away from the book to stare at Izuku with wide eyes. They're dulled with fear and uncertainty. Because it sure feels like I am. I saw a floating book, but apparently I didn't. That makes me seem pretty crazy, Midoriya. You're not, Izuku assures quietly but sternly, catching Oboro's gaze from across the room. The ghost is watching Izuku intently, like he's trying to figure out what'll happen next, but... Please, just not here, okay? You're not crazy, but not here. Shinsou's wide eyes search Izuku's face. He glances back down at the book, then looks back at Izuku. The faintest amount of tension eases from his shoulders as he catches his bottom lip between his teeth. Where, then? The green-haired teen bites his own lip. Come on. He's followed by Shinsou and Oboro. He leads them both out of the room and into the main living area. His guardians are in the kitchen, Shota at the table surrounded by Class 1A's most recent essay assignment, and Hizashi has stood at the counter prepping something as the coffee pot runs behind him. Hey, Sho, Zashi. Both turn to look at the 2 teenagers stood by the kitchen doorway. Shinsou and I are going to take a walk, is that okay? And where are you 2 off to? Shota asks, looking down at his markings and circling something. Just a walk, Shinsou answers instead of Izuku. Before the green-haired teen can even formulate a response, Shinsou raises an eyebrow, looking between his uncles and Izuku. Why the concern, Uncle Sho? Is Midoriya not allowed to leave without a chaperone? Izuku sputters in offense beside the purple-haired teen, shooting him the most vicious glare that he can muster up at the insinuation. Shinsou pretends not to notice, keeping his gaze on his uncle sat at the table. Izuku huffs a heavy, prominently annoyed breath before looking over at his foster parents. No! Hizashi huffs in defense, shooting the purple-haired teen a warning glance. He can come and go as he pleases under the same household rules that apply to you too, Hitoshi. Of course he's allowed to leave. Well, Shota drawls just as Hizashi finishes speaking. To be fair, he probably shouldn't be allowed without a pro-chaperone considering his growing track record. Shota's lips quirk upwards at his own words, but he doesn't have his gaze stray from where he's circling something on the paper. 1A are danger magnets, and unfortunately Problem Child is usually at the center of it. This time Shinsou's the one to attempt a straight face, despite the smile threatening to twitch on his lips. He glances over at Izuku, mouth uneven like he's really struggling not to laugh. It doesn't help that Oboro's also snickering behind him. Izuku pouts. Stop it! Hizashi scolds his husband, wagging an accusing finger in his direction. Shota's eyes lift briefly from his work to catch the action. The dark-haired man lets out a humored snort before dropping his gaze back down. He does not need a chaperone. We trust you, Izuku. These 2 are just jerks. Hizashi pauses, eyeing Shota before narrowing his eyes at Shinsou, who watches him right back. I swear, Sho, he's just like your sarcastic little clone. He practically is you from high school, just Hizashi waves his hands, gesturing in a distance to Shinsou, mostly around his head. More purple. Shinsou actually looks pleased at this, cocking his head to eye his uncle before smiling back at Hizashi with a crooked eyebrow and a crooked smile. Thanks, Uncle Zashi. That's not a compliment, Hizashi huffs, wrinkling his nose. The annoyance is a poor front, considering the man's lips twitch into a smile that he's obviously trying to keep at bay. Shinsou laughs at this, and even Izuku snickers behind his hand. Obero's muffling his own laughter into his sleeve, and even the corner of Shota's lips have raised into a tiny smile. Izuku isn't entirely sure how to act right now. There's a flow to the dynamic that he's just not a part of yet. It's all clearly familiar to these three, Shota and Hitoshi being sarcastic back and forth, with Hizashi being the middleman trying to keep the peace. It's natural. We're just kidding around, problem child. Shota looks up again when the laughter finally dies down a little. He catches Izuku's eye, raising an eyebrow in a silent question. Shota's gaze doesn't waver, nor does he drop his attention back to his work until Izuku nods. He does know they're just playing around, and truthfully, 1A definitely are trouble magnets. Izuku's glad that they're willing to let him have some freedom. I trust you. Honestly, Midoriya, we're just riling Zashi up at this point. Shinsou adds, flashing a toothy, sarcastically sweet smile at Hizashi when the man whips around to gape in offense at the teen. You two really are the worst. Hizashi pouts for just a second before directing the conversation back. We were just wondering when you two were going to be off, because dinner will be ready soon. How long are you going to be gone? When will dinner be ready? Izuku cocks his head. Hizashi looks over at the clock, then down at his cooking before turning to grab a mug from the cupboard and pouring Shota a coffee. Can you be back in 45 minutes-ish? Of course, Izuku chirps. I'll set an alarm for half an hour so we can start walking back. Hizashi walks the mug to the table, eyeing Shota over his nose. Not that you deserve this, Aizawa. I love you, Shota hums, and Hizashi practically melts at the affection. Handing the mug over, Shota finally sets the pen in his hand down in favor of clutching the mug over steaming coffee that his husband had just passed over between his hands. I don't see a problem with it then, so long as you're back by dinner and don't run into any villains on the way. That's an oddly specific guideline. Shinsou blinks, glancing between Shota and Izuku. Shota shrugs tiredly, sipping at his coffee before glaring down at the essay in front of him, distastefully. It's relevant. Can't argue with it, Hizashi shrugs from where he'd retaken his spot by the counter. And if you two are heading out, make sure you both have your phones, too. Like we don't always have our phones on us, Shinsou snorts, cocking his head in Hizashi's direction with a tiny smile. We are teenagers, Uncle Zashi. It's not like we can forget with that attitude. Shota throws back playfully, circling yet another thing on the essay. It's more red pen strokes than printed black font at this point, and Izuku really hopes that one's not his. Now, shoo, I'd like to suffer through my marking in peace and quiet while I question my choice of career. Besides, the longer you two hang out, the less time you'll have to walk. Yeah, Shinsou huffs, arms lacing over his chest. Right, Izuku yelps at the same time, grabbing onto Shinsou's sleeve and dragging him away. Thank you. See you soon. Izuku calls over his shoulder as he and Shinsou move to the door, each putting on their shoes before stepping out. So, where exactly are we going? Shinsou questions when they're halfway down the hallway. And what exactly couldn't you tell me with my uncles around? You noticed that? Izuku mumbles sheepishly, rubbing at the back of his neck. Obero behind them lets out a prompt laugh. It was kind of obvious, Shinsou shrugs. So, where are we going? Just follow me. The playground he'd found a couple blocks away from the apartment building hadn't changed at all since the day Izuku and Obero had had their heart-to-heart on the swings. It's still poorly kept and overgrown, rusted, and weathered. Shinsou eyes the place from the street, and Izuku trudges on through the long, unmowed grass toward the swing set. Is this where you're going to kill me? No, Izuku snorts out. I just know no one comes around very often. I mean, look at the place. Oh, I am. Shinsou furrows his brow. And I gotta say, I'm not filled with confidence that you won't kill me here, despite your words. It would be stupid to kill you now, Izuku huffs out, gesturing the purple-haired teen to follow. I'm the last person to see you, so I'd be the first suspect if I did kill you. That's like murder 101. Come on now. Obero snorts at Izuku, and Shinsou hesitates. Was that supposed to reassure me? Do you want to know about what happened in my room or not? Just so you know, Shinsou draws as he finally follows suit, nose scrunching up as he treks through the overgrowth. If you do kill me now, know I'll haunt you for the rest of your life. Wow, ironic. Oboro lets out a surprised laugh. Tell him to join the club. I hate it here. Izuku glares at the ghost, voice venomous and near silent. One look at the grinning blue-haired entity tells Izuku that Oboro knows he doesn't mean the playground. It's just loud enough to send Oboro into another fit of laughter. You suck. Oh, come on, you know you love me, Izu-chan. Izuku doesn't respond. He just drops onto one of the swings. It's the one that Oboro had been on last time. He twists his hands around the chains and sways himself slowly back and forth with a guiding foot on the ground. The ghost wisely chooses to lean against the swing set poles instead of taking the second swing, which Shinsou plops onto when he finally catches up. Neither of them says anything for a second, and even Oboro seems to read the tension, because he remains blissfully silent as well. Izuku gives the other teen credit. He knows Shinsou's desperate for answers, but he's not pushing. He's sitting quietly beside Izuku as the green-haired teen tries to figure out a way to ease into this. How do you tell someone something like this without them thinking you're crazy, and then also thinking that they're crazy too if they actually believe you? Well, he supposes there's only one place to start. Izuku glares down at his knees, hands tightening around the chains. Do you believe in ghosts? And he holds onto a bated breath. Do I believe in ghosts? Shinsou repeats flatly after a tense second. That was just a joke, Midoriya. I thought that you brought me here so you'd tell me what the hell just happened in your room, but if this is all just a joke to you, it's not. Izuku promises. Swing chains are rattling as he lets go of them, waving his hands before him. Shinsou wilts a little when he glances at Izuku, eyes narrowed like he's picking apart Izuku's expression. Izuku can only imagine he looks as panicked as he feels. Really, it's not. I wouldn't joke now. Not now. Just... Izuku blows out a calming breath that doesn't really calm him. Do you believe in ghosts? Serious question. Shinsou watches him for a long second, and it feels like Izuku can't breathe under his eyes. Yes, he finally answers with a heavy sigh. Izuku hears the other swing, and he creaks it back and forth as Shinsou starts to sway. He doesn't need to look over to know that the other boy is watching him still. Why? What would you say if I told you... Izuku hesitates, chancing a quick glance at the other teen before dropping his gaze back to his lap and clearing his throat. If I told you they were real. Shinsou's quiet for a moment, and Izuku is internally panicking. What if Shinsou leaves now and tells Shota and Hizashi that Izuku's insane? Will they keep him? Will it be a he said battle where the two men have to choose who's more trustworthy? Izuku wouldn't stand a chance. They've known Shinsou since he was born. They just met Izuku a couple months ago. I'd tell you to prove it. Izuku jolts up from his crushing thoughts. What? If you were so sure that they were real, I'd tell you to prove it. Shinsou's not looking at Izuku anymore. He's faintly swinging and staring off the slide across the grassy field. I can't make up an excuse for what that book was floating around for, Midoriya. I can't. It was floating, and then it dropped. I don't know what you'd want me to think from that, or why you'd want to trick me. I don't even know how you'd make a book do that, but I can't believe it off of just that. You actually... Izuku swallows, mouth and throat feeling dry. You don't think I'm crazy? Any crazier than the guy who saw the levitating book? Shinsou snorts, kicking his legs out and digging his heels into the patch of worn-down grass and dirt that proves the playground isn't completely abandoned. I believe in ghosts, but if you're so sure, you've got to prove it. Oh, and the floating book wasn't enough proof, seriously? Oboro groans, slumping down against the pole. There's no light bulb for me to play with, Izu. I don't know how I can prove myself. Why is everyone so skeptical anyways? Without thinking, Izuku waves a hand out to silence the ghost. Oboro sputters in offense, arms crossing over his chest as he glares. Rude? Shinsou watches with narrowed eyes, but doesn't mention it, especially since Izuku hadn't realized he'd done it. Izuku's quiet for a moment until he finally finds his voice through the shock. Why aren't you afraid? Why are you even humoring me? Why haven't you left, told them that I'm insane? You literally just asked if I believe in ghosts, and I said yes. You asked if I believed you, if you said they were real, and I said prove it, because I already believe they're real. You can't go wrong with proof, though, right? There's literally nothing incriminating about that. Besides, anything I tell them will fall back on me, too. You clearly believe in ghosts. I believe in ghosts. I mean, we both saw that book. Shinsou cuts himself off, overwhelmed. He lets out a stuttery breath that crumbles down his calm facade slightly. A book was floating in your room. That shit doesn't happen. We're clearly on the same page. You know, the apartment's haunted too. You live there. Surely you would have seen too. You would have seen it, right? I've known for years that apartment was haunted. Weird stuff happens there, Midoriya, but I've never seen that. It's not weird stuff, Oboro pouts. I'm just trying to live my afterlife, kid. I don't just believe it's haunted. Izuku squeezes his eyes shut. I know it is, Shinsou. Yeah, I know. I saw the book too. I see ghosts. Shinsou freezes, and even Oboro falls through the pole that he's using as support, flapping his hands as he tried to find his bearings before falling onto his ass. Oh my god, you're as blunt as Shota, Izuku. You... Shinsou blinks once, then twice before continuing. You see them? Izuku swallows again with a tiny nod. I see them. I see them and hear them, and they follow me sometimes. I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not crazy, Shinsou. You see ghosts, Shinsou croaks out, his voice startled and emotionless all at once. You broke a Toshi. Oboro has pulled himself up, rounding Izuku, who's watching both Shinsou and Oboro, leaning almost face to face with Shinsou. Good luck explaining this one to Sho and Hizashi, Izuku. Prove it. It's just like deja vu. Hadn't he had this exact conversation with Kachan? I swear, Oboro groans again, finally stepping away from Shinsou. You teenagers all just think I'm some sort of show pony, huh? Tell the ghost to do a trick and he will. I mean, I will, of course, because I can now, but it's still rude to assume that I'll be so compliant. Izuku rolls his eyes at Oboro, and the ghost huffs in offense. Push me, Izuku says suddenly. Shinsou's eyes widen, and his gaze snaps to the other team at the demand. The purple-haired teen opens his mouth to reply, but Izuku shakes his head apologetically. Sorry, not you. Shinsou's mouth shuts with a click of his teeth, eyes wide. He gives a slow, uncertain nod in reply. I don't think I like your tone, sir. Oboro's lip juts out in a pout. Nonetheless, he moves swiftly to stand behind Izuku. The green-haired teen lifts his feet up off the ground, and Shinsou simply seems to copy him after a second of thought. He'll be the control aspect of the experiment. There's no wind, and neither of them move now that there's nothing on them, touching the ground to guide them. Shinsou's eyes narrow as if he's coming to the same conclusion. Izuku holds his breath as Oboro finally reaches for the chains. Hesitating just under Izuku's own white-fisted hands, the ghost finally closes the distance, and they both let out a breath when his hands grip the chains instead of phasing through. Izuku would look like an idiot if Oboro couldn't get it to work. Oboro pulls the swing back slowly, like a parent drawing back to push their child, teenager and all, and Shinsou chokes on a breath beside him, eyes wide and watching intently. Oboro lets go when Izuku is pulled up just enough that he'll actually sway a few times, and gravity does its job, pulling Izuku down and then forwards by force. You... what? What the fuck? Shinsou hasn't moved, but his feet are now planted on the ground, and he's staring at Izuku like he's an enigma. Oboro doesn't dare touch the swing again. He doesn't want to accidentally touch Izuku, not when he forgot to put the heated jacket on that arrived recently. Izuku clenches his jaw anxiously, waiting for Shinsou to actually be able to competently put a sentence together. It takes a second. You weren't lying. You see ghosts. You got a ghost to push you on the swing. Only because he asked so nicely, Oboro huffs sarcastically, shooting Izuku a dry look. He's clearly a bit annoyed still. Izuku bites his lip. I know it's a lot to take in, but... Wow, okay. Shinsou rubs heavily at his eyes with heels of his palms, seeming to finally be coming out of his shock. He shakes his head, glaring up at the sky. There's a ghost. There's a ghost here. Right now, you have a ghost friend. You see ghosts, and they're your friends. A pause where Shinsou finally looks over at Izuku, staring intently like he's trying to understand him. I can't wrap my head around that. That's wild. You couldn't have said you have, I don't know, that you have some underlying telekinesis quirk or something? Well, Izuku sputters, jaw snapping shut as dread pulls in his stomach. It could have been that easy. That was a good logical excuse. A lot more logical than I see ghosts. Plus, that makes sense. My mom has a telekinesis quirk. That actually would have been, Shinsou, would Would you believe I have a residual telekinesis quirk from my mom? No chance in hell. Shinsou glares, like full-on glares. Nice try, but I literally just gave you that excuse. Maybe if you told me before admitting to the ghost thing? Yeah, Izuku huffs, shaking his head. True. So, do they know? Shinsou's staring right at Izuku now, not even looking around to try and spot the ghost like Kanchan had. Oboros watching Shinsou closely, eyebrows furrowed like he's waiting for the other teen to try and locate him. What? Izuku whispers out, eyes locking with the purple. Shinsou eyes him lightly, soft and cautious. My uncles, do they know about your ability? No! Izuku scrambles off the swing. No, and they can't. I can't, please. They can't know, Shinsou. I can't do it again. Please, you can't tell them. They can't know. Hey, relax. Shinsou stands too, slowly and more graceful than Izuku does. I won't tell him if you don't want me to. I don't know why you won't, why you're so scared, but I won't. I promise. So, who knows? Just Bakugo from my class. He's the only one who believes me. Now, I mean. Him? Shinsou scrunches his face up. The guy from the sports festival? That guy's a dick. Why would you tell him? I always knew I liked this kid. Oboro puffs his chest out, nodding proudly at an unassuming Shinsou. Childhood friend, Izuku answers as if his ghost friend didn't say anything. He knew me when I was little, when I didn't, hide it. What about your parents? Shinsou frowns. Don't they know? Izuku wilts, dropping back into the swing. Shinsou seems to realize his error almost instantly, his eyes widening. Ah, shit, sorry, Midoriya. I forgot there's probably something going on if you're staying with Shota and Hizashi. Shinsou pauses, mouth pressing into a line in thought. A second later, his face twists like he'd eaten a slice of lemon. And I'm going to guess it has something to do with this, the ghosts. Andy hit the nail on the head. Izuku doesn't answer, just stares down at his hands. I'm overstepping again, Shinsou decides loudly. I should just work on that. Sorry, Midoriya. Izuku winces as his cracking voice plays out. Please, Izuku's fine. Instead of Midoriya, I mean, you know my darkest secret now, right? Well, one of them. That makes us friends. If you want, I mean, you don't have to. It's fine. Hitoshi, then. Shinsou answers easily, shrugging his shoulders. He doesn't reclaim the swing, so Oboro does instead, watching the exchange like it's the most interesting film he's ever watched. It'd be weird if I called you Izuku and you still called me Shinsou, right? I mean, we are basically cousins. Right. Izuku accepts the excuse with a light smile. Izuku is so glad Hitoshi just goes with the flow on this. He's not pushing Izuku for answers about his parents, and he's not weirded out that Izuku's asking to be called by his given name, after not even 2 weeks of friendship. Izuku's phone dings in his pocket, and the two of them, the ghost as well, jump in surprise. He shuffles the device out to turn off the warning alarm. We should start heading back. Sure. Hitoshi nods, offering Izuku a hand. Izuku takes it with a cocked expression, and Hitoshi tugs him up. Oboro huffs a laugh and follows his lead. Man, you're freezing. Yeah, Izuku nods. It's a whole thing, ghost-related. Hitoshi's eyebrows furrow in confusion, but his only response is a quiet, ah. They fall into step together, both walking quietly. Oboro at Izuku's side, walking on the road, unfazed by cars that are phasing through him occasionally as they pass by. The silence doesn't last long. So, Hitoshi rubs at the back of his neck. The apartment really is haunted, yeah? I mean, weird shit does happen. How many ghosts are there? Like, have they always been there? Did they come with the apartment and stay with my uncles? Just one ghost. He's a good guy. You don't have to be worried about him. Izuku pauses, looking at his side where Oboro's watching, following the conversation. He's been around for a while. He likes Shota and Hizashi. That's cool. Hitoshi nods. But it's also scary as fuck. He really nice? Yeah. Izuku can't help but smile as Oboro grins. He's really cool. He have a name? Izuku hesitates at this. Does Hitoshi know Oboro? Would he remember him? Izuku does not want Oboro's name or his presence getting out. He doesn't want Shota or Hizashi to know. Ro, Izuku tells his friend slowly. He answers to Ro. Well, I do now, I suppose. Oboro huffs dramatically as Izuku shoots him a small smile. Ro. Hizashi tastes the name, looking around them subtly. Hey, Ro. Nice to meet you, I guess. You've scared me since I was like a baby, but it's nice to know that you're cool. I take it you're the romance novel guy then? So you're into the raunchy stuff, or you're just a romantic softie? I like the plot. Oboro whines loudly and Izuku just loses it. Shinzo pauses at Izuku's side as the cackling teenager folds in half, struggling to breathe through his laughter. Shinzo pats Izuku's back. It's the raunchy stuff, right? Ro, you fiend. Oboro cards his fingers through his hairs, and he groans out a noise that sounds more like a defeated growl than anything else. Izuku decides then that he might actually like having someone else he can talk to. Alright everyone, this concludes Chapter 24 of Yuuei Survival Guide. Chapter 25 will be next, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.